Hello there, and welcome back to another episode. We've got another game here that we're going to shoutcast for you guys. This time we've got two other well-known streamers. We've got MythicFishMom, who is playing a Blood Wild mid-range deck, and we've got Havoc, who is playing a Ruby Sapphire Gorefeast deck. Both of these decks, the Ruby Sapphire deck, I think most of us have probably seen something like this before. He's got a lot of cheap threats, and he's got the Gorefeast and Grolk, Menacing Grolk, to be finishers for him. Mythic's deck, though, is a little bit of a brew. I don't know that we've really seen a whole lot like this on the Challenge Series. His is a Blood Wild mid-range deck featuring some Vampire Kings, Crash of Beasts for some of his threats, and also the Battle Beetle with the Spell Shield gem on him. So these are the brew I'm really excited about. There's actually some really interesting decks in this tournament. Papa, what do you think is going to happen in this matchup here?
Well, JJ, it's going to be an interesting matchup. Obviously, both decks bring different strategies to the table. I like that Havoc's deck has a few extra tools in it that you might not see in a typical Gorestorm deck. I believe I saw a Replicator's Gambit when I was looking through his deck. I don't know how many of those he necessarily had. I noticed Reginald Lancashire in that deck. What I didn't notice, interestingly, is one of the deck's namesake cards in Stormcall. Not a card that I noticed in his deck. It'll be interesting to see if that's the case, how his deck plays out. Mythic, on the other hand, like you said, running very much of a mid-range deck, accelerating into some very good, solid cards that are hard to deal with and have very effective presence on the board. I think if I have to look at how this is going to interact with each other, the Gorestorm deck typically plays out that if it can get a troop or two advantage on the board, that's all it needs with a Gorefeast, and then that would be the game. Mythic's deck isn't necessarily built on getting a lot of troops on the board, nor does it have a lot of removal from what I've seen. So I would have to say, at least going in, that Havoc should have a sizable strategical advantage going into this matchup.
Would you say that Havoc probably wins most of the games that end quickly, and do you think that Mythic wins most of the games that go longer?
Uh, that's still a little bit hard to say because Gorefeast is one of those cards that can win at any stage of the game. I've seen it win turn 4. I've seen it win turn 8, turn 10. If the board position is set up in such a way, Gorefeast can win from many different standpoints. I think just based on troop power, though, Mythic's deck has more power inherent in its troops. But Gorefeast is quite the mighty equalizer in that.
And I think where you're going with this too is that there's a lot of synergy in Havoc's deck, and one of the things that kind of stood out to me too was that the number of humans in his deck is a little higher than I think we've seen in some of the other ones, and the Lord Benjamin, he plays that, and there's actually quite a few targets for him to hit off of that. So there's definitely a lot of good synergy in that deck. I like it.
Yeah, a lot of card drawing between. What we saw? We saw Mentalist, which isn't in a lot of the decks. The Cerulean Mentalist, and the Cerulean Mirror Knights, and Lord Benjamin. He has several engines to keep drawing cards.
Absolutely. Well, let's go ahead and see how this game is going to play out here. We've got MythicFishMom versus Havoc. It looks like Mythic has won the play here, and he has decided that he wants to play first. His opening hand is 3 shards, one of which is that Shards of Fate, Chlorophilia, Crash of Beasts, Vampire King, Wild Root Dancer. He has decided that he wants to keep this. Havoc has also kept his 7 cards. He has 4 resources with the Mirror Knight, Mentalist, and Ruby Falconer. Really, it looks like these are both pretty good opening hands for both of these players.
They look like exceptional hands. Something we didn't talk about pregame, it looks like Mythic is running Zared Venomscorn as his champion. think that has probably the most effectiveness that it can against Havoc's deck, as there are a lot of 1 toughness troops that Havoc will be putting on the table.
All right, well, Havoc has drawn a burn for his turn and decided to just play out the ruby and pass it back. For Mythic's turn here, he's going to play out the blood shard and run out the chlorophylla here, accelerate his resources.
That looks like a turn 3 Vampire King, if I see it right.
That is a Vampire King there. It could be pretty early. We've got a...
Looking at Havoc's hand, he has no answers for it currently.
Yes, Havoc is going to go ahead and start with his own threats here. He's drawn a shard and decided to go with the Mirror Knight. And he's going to pass it back.
I think you have to go with Vampire King here, and then hope that you draw another resource. Well, there's another one for Wild Root Dancer to pump it up the following turn.
And that is exactly what he's drawn here. He's got the resource in his hand already here. Vampire King against the Mirror Knight doesn't seem like very much of a fair fight.
No, especially when that Vampire King's going to be getting bigger. Havoc's got to be wondering if he can, how many of his troops he can dump on the table all in one turn.
For his turn, he has drawn a Reginald Lancashire, so Havoc does have choices here. He could decide to go with Mentalist, or he could go with the Reginald.
I guess it might depend on... He doesn't have an answer for the Vampire King in his hand right now. I think if I were him, I'd almost have to try to go with the Lancashire and hope that I can maybe luck out a win.
He decided to go with the Mentalist here. Looks like Havoc's settling in for a little bit more of a long game, trying to go for the Inspire triggers instead of going for the Reginald here. Okay. Mythic has, on his turn, he is going to draw, after some lag, a Chlorophylla.
Solid draw.
Solid draw. Now this is a turn where the Shards of Fate is maybe a little bit of a downside. He is going to get the shard here to get the activation. Would have been a little better for him though if it had been able to use that resource this turn and go with the Chlorophylla here too.
Yeah, that would have been. I don't know if the damage dealt by Vampire King is as big of a issue as the triggered ability at this point in the game, though.
And that is a very good point, because we are not going to be able to get a block out of Havoc here. So this Vampire King is definitely going to connect. There are 2 troops in his hand currently. For those of you that don't know, the ability here will randomly check a card, and if it's a troop, it will be removed from your hand and turn into a vampire.
There is the life gain, the life drain ability here going on that could bring Mythic out of Gorefeast range.
And it does, in fact, hit Royal Falconer. Oh,
Ouch.
man. Royal Falconer is gone. Was that the best troop that it could have possibly gotten?
Oh, by far. After he played the Mentalist, Havoc had to have been looking to try to play the Falconer, to have the multiple birds, to try to draw cards and draw his way out of this game. I bet he wishes he had played the Reginald now.
Alright, for his turn, Havoc has drawn another resource. Decide to activate his champion ability. And he is going to go ahead and remove the Wild Root Dancer. And it looks like we're going to see an attack. So Havoc brings in with the Mentalist and with the 3/1 Haste Elemental.
Well, that Elemental will draw a card if it hits.
Yep, looks like Mythic does allow it to connect. Havoc draws another resource here. decides to go ahead and play out his Reginald Lancashire. That Reginald does get inspiration buffs from both the Mirror Knight and the Mentalist here. End of turn, the Elemental dies, and Havoc draws another shard. He's got a lot of shards in hand right now.
Well, on the bright side, there's no troops for Vampire King to convert over.
That is true. So here we've seen activation from Mythic. He's decided to shrink the Reginald.
Battle Beetle's looking pretty strong in this situation as well.
Yep. Mythic decides to attack in with both of his troops. They are both life drained, and there are no blockers because they are flying.
Battle Beetle here is a kill on board for next turn. That would be what? Just doing the math. 12 flying for next turn?
Yep. With that Battle Beetle's activated ability, it can give it flying, and that is a total of 12 flying that he is representing right now. Let's see if Havoc can draw something to get out of this. He does have some draws that could save him, but it's a shard this time. Say if he had drawn a Menacing Grolk, there's a possibility he could do something here.
Menacing Grolk would have been extremely nice.
And he tells him that he's got the 5 resources.
So it looks like we're going on to reserves. See how each deck and each player responds.
Alright. First, we're going to go ahead and look at Havoc here. He's got some Ragefires, some Oracle Songs, Incantations, and Ancestors Chosen for his sideboard slots. He's decided to take the Gambit out and bring the rest of the Ragefires in. He's going to take out, looks like he's going to shave down one of his Gore Feasts, go down to 2 copies.
Kind of surprised to see those bottled Vitae in there. Not sure what he's doing with those.
He's still thinking here. He does still have the Mastery of Time and the Crocs.
I think if it was me, I'd bring in Ancestors Chosen here.
He's decided to shave one more Reginald, going down to just a single copy. And he's decided to shave off one of his bottles here as well. Looks like he's happy with all of his cards, but he just doesn't want to have quite as many copies, and he wants to be able to bring in the Ragefires. So from Mythic's side, he's making lots of changes here. I actually missed a couple of them, but it looks like he's bringing in, what was it, the Chaos Key that he brought in? No, he's bringing in Extinctions, and what else did I miss? Taking out the Chaos Keys.
Do those Zentos Inquisitors even have a gem in them? He just gave us a view of it, and I didn't even see a gem.
I thought it was the Blood view. I think it's the Shrinking Blood gem that he has on there. He's bringing in the Hydras, and he's shaving off one of the Root Dancers.
Zombie Plague looks like it should be quite the monster choice here.
That was what he brought in. That's what I missed. The Zombie Plagues. Thank you. Alright. So it looks like he's got a lot of troop suppression here with the 3 Extinctions, the 2 Zombie Plagues, the Zentos Inquisitor, and the Genesis Hydra. Just another threat for him. Okay. Let's see how this works out. So for both of our players here, we'll have Havoc on the play this time. His opening hand is 3 resources with a Ragefire, a Mastery of Time, Royal Falconer, and Cerulean Mentalist.
Oof. I'm not sure I would keep Mythic's hand.
Mythic's hand, looks like he has decided to keep it. He's got 2 Blood resources and 4 wild cards with Crash Beast, Battle Beetle, the Genesis Hydra, the Howling Brave, and a single Vampire King is the only blood card.
Yeah, I think that's one I would have shipped. Well, hopefully it plays out well for him, but I don't think I would have kept that one.
Yep. Looks like he's hoping to draw a wild. He doesn't get a wild on his first turn. He gets a Root Dancer here on that first draw. For Havoc's first draw, he's got another resource here. He decides to just play out a second resource and pass it back.
He's got that Cerulean Mentalist Royal Falconer combo again.
And Mythic here is drawing another wild card. He's got his second Crash of Beast now with still no wild in sight yet. And he will also be passing it back. And for his turn, Havoc draws a Buccaneer here. Empty board, so he goes ahead and plays the Mentalist. And he's going to pass it back as well. If you're in Havoc's shoes right here, what are you thinking?
Well, he's thinking that he's a turn ahead of last game. You know, last game Mentalist didn't come down until after the board was already cluttered. You know, Mythic started with some early ramp, so Havoc's got to be sitting pretty pretty right now. He can play his Falconer next turn, and all is well.
Yeah. Well, unfortunately, Mythic misses on the shard here again. And unfortunately, he's forced to discard a Wild Root Dancer.
Yeah, I'm not sure I would have got rid of the Dancer. I think I would have probably gotten rid of the Hydra at this point.
Well, for his own turn, Havoc has another resource. He plays it out. Puts the Falconer out there.
Drew a Menacing Grok as well, just in case Mythic had any chance of recovering. I think that Grok probably, assuming he draws the third Sapphire resource, would probably finish him off.
Well, it's just 2 damage this turn, but he's threatening a lot more damage this next turn. Passes it off.
Just looking at his hand, he has the Grok and the Mastery of Time. Just a lot of ways of taking advantage.
Mythic's drawing yet another wild card without a wild resource in sight here. So unfortunately, Mythic's just going to have to concede this one. Not much of a game that time. One thing that's worth asking here, you see in his deck, he's actually got 10 blood, 12 wild, and 2 shards of fate. So he actually is favored to draw the wild. What do you think about the 4 shards of fate in this deck versus the 10, 12, and 2?
Well, I mean, he's built on a curve. You know, he's certainly wanting to get out the Crash of Beast turn 2 or Vampire King's turn 3. And Shards of Fate certainly plays havoc, no pun intended. Certainly plays havoc with those plans. So I think he's trying to minimize that. But there are a lot of double threshold cost cards in there. So, I mean, he certainly has a trade-off going.
Well, certainly this hand looks a lot better for Mythic this time around. He's got the turn 1 Howling Brave. And he's also got the Blood, Murder, Chlorophylla, and 2 Battle Beetles in his hand here.
Yep. Looking at Havoc's isn't horrible either. You know, especially on the draw. He's got the 2 Mentalists, he's got another Falconer, and he does already have the Gorfies loaded up, ready to go, so.
He's got his 2 shards here, and he draws a Crushing Blow for the turn.
Yeah, that's one of those cards he has in his deck that I find a little questionable. I think that deck typically plays more of a swarm strategy instead of a crush strategy, but we'll see if that works out for him.
Well, here we're going to see time-honored tradition of a Howling Brave Beats, followed up by a Chlorophylla.
Well, what more do you want out of your 1/1 for 1 resource?
Certainly not to get more resources. And we'll pass it back here.
Cavern Hydra next turn, probably.
So for his turn, Havoc has drawn a burn.
Do you burn it now? Yeah, he is.
He has decided to go with the burn on the accelerator. And he's down on resources. Yeah, I think I would go ahead and burn that here in this spot as well.
Yeah.
You can't afford to fall too far behind on the board, especially when you've already got a lot of endgame threats like he does.
Well, and on top of that, Burns' main target in this would have been Wild Root Dancer, and had Mythic had one, he likely would have played it last turn. He certainly had the resources. So I think Havoc can take that information and be a little more assertive with that play.
So for his turn, Mythic has drawn the resource and played the Hydra, shipped it back. Havoc, however, still has not drawn his third resource. He's just a little behind here. Unfortunately, that might end up costing him here.
Well, if he can find one quickly, that Buccaneer can quickly make up that time.
And we'll see an attack here from the Hydra. We've drawn another Battle Beetle here, the third one.
Mythic's got to be looking for 2 more resources. Havoc's got to have a resource here to stay in this game, I think.
And let's see, is the top of deck merciful this time? It is. He has drawn a second Sapphire resource here.
Oh, there he is. At least we have a game. I think you got to start with the Buccaneer to give yourself a chance to regain tempo, but I don't know what he looks like. He's looking at a Mentalist. Ooh, I don't know about that.
Looks like Havoc is he's hoping to go a little bit longer with the game.
I don't know if you can hope to go longer with the game when you already missed a resource drop and you don't have any more guaranteed to you. I just don't know if that was very smart.
Well, we'll see an attack here from the Genesis Hydra again. There's definitely no tricks coming in this turn, so this will be another 4 points of damage.
Should we notice if you're learning how to play too, definitely the correct call to make the attack. Give Havoc the chance to make the mistake and block. I mean, as opposed to some people might want him to use his murder right away or whichever else. But certainly let the opponent have the chance to make that mistake.
Alright, and for his turn, Havoc has drawn another Gorg Feast here. I believe those are the only 2 copies that are in his deck at this point.
There's that murder.
Yep, we see the Buccaneer play and the murder on the Mentalist in response.
But a resource here out of Mythic means back-to-back-to-back beetles, and I'm not sure Havoc has the ability to deal with that.
And from the top here, well, it's a Howling Brave. Mythic decides to go ahead and recast the Cavern Hydra, but it costs 5 since it was Buccaneer, so that's his only play for the turn. And he'll pass it back.
Well, with a ruby draw, you could go Royal Falconer and hope to win the game with Gorefeast, but that did not happen.
Yep. Instead, we've drawn a Menacing Grulk. Good threat if we have enough resources, but unfortunately, it looks like we're playing another Mentalist here.
Interesting note that they can double block and only trade with one of them at this point. That's not a bad trade, I would say.
And for his turn, Mythic has drawn a Vampire King, which so far in this matchup has proven to be pretty strong. Does Havoc have a lot of ways to interact with the Vampire King in his deck?
Well, I know he brought in the Rage Fires, and I think that's probably one of the purposes he brought those in. He can Buccaneer to give himself some more time in that regard, but I think that's probably one of the main reasons he tried to bring Ragefire in from the resources, or reserves, excuse me.
Well, it looks like Mythic is going to continue extending his lead here then. He's played a Vampire King, and he's also thrown the Howling Grave out there.
I think I would have double blocked there as well, but again, Havoc seems to be trying to play a long game and try to draw extra cards, but I think I would have double blocked the Cavern Hydra there.
Well, Havoc does get the 4th resource here. Let's see if he can turn this around.
Only sitting on 7 life.
When you talk about turnaround cards here, how good is that Falconer at turning around at this spot?
Well, it gives them 2 flyers to block and kill the Vampire King. That's probably the most important of note. Havoc, he hasn't been playing in a style that seems to want to block and kill opposing troops, but at some point it seems like that's going to have to be what he does.
Now, on the previous turn, he attacked with the Hydra. Do you think if Havoc had double blocked, that Mythic would have used his champion power that turn?
I mean, he might have, but if you look at it still, if you look at even if that happened, Havoc would be at 11. He would still have the Falconer. He wouldn't have those 2 troops, and now this can't kill one of the flyers. Or in this case, yes, the Royal Falconer. I mean, I think Havoc would have been in a much better position all the way around had he double blocked.
Fair enough. Well, we do see the activation of the champion on the Royal Falconer here. And we also see the attack from Mythic with the Vampire King.
I was just noting Mythic's pointer going back and forth between the Buccaneer and Mentalist. I think maybe he was commenting on his own about that same play.
And he decides to go ahead and make one of those Battle Beetles here. Alright, Havoc has drawn a Cerulean Mirror Knight. Let's see what he can do here. What do you think? Does he go for a Gore Feast and hope to get in a little damage and draw some cards? Or does he have any other options?
I mean, he could survive a turn by blocking the Battle Beetle. I think maybe do that, and then you Rage Fire the Howling Brave or something.
Well, here he's made the Mirror Knight.
Yeah, he's going to try to kill the Battle Beetle, I think, or even the Hydra is what he's trying to do, using that Crushing Blow and the Blaze Elemental as a removal spell. But Mythic's not having any of it, it doesn't look like.
Yep, Mythic declines blocking here, so we won't see any Crushing Blow blowouts here. We do get to draw a card from dealing damage from the Mentalist trigger.
Yep, he's going to draw another card at the end of the turn from the Mirror Knight.
And it turns out he actually has drawn another Mirror Knight here on this turn, so he could play that.
I think Rage Fire on Howling Brave is a stronger play. That allows a draw into another Rage Fire next turn to kill the Vampire King. Of course, you'd still have the Battle Beetle to deal with, but...
Yeah, Havoc's giving this some serious consideration here. It looks like he is thinking about the Rage Fire play, but he's decided to go with the second Mirror Knight instead. Okay, and when the Elemental dies at the end of turn, he draws a Buccaneer. Okay. Looks like he said GG, but I don't know if he'll actually pass it here. He's not technically dead this turn.
No. And Mythic can afford to actually Chlorophylla and play the Battle Beetle this turn. Oh, he's going to give it flying instead.
Okay. And he does give it flying and attacks in.
I'm not sure. There's another place. I'm not sure I would have done that. I think I would have just attacked with Vampire King, allowed him to either block or not block, and then played another Battle Beetle to extend that much more. Because I mean, right now, Havoc's only out is Gore Feast. That would have given Mythic 2 more blockers and still dead on the table next turn.
So that's worth asking here. Does he have enough power to get through and kill with the Gore Feast this next turn?
Well, he's got a block, so he's going to lose the bird. Yeah. Just trying to do the quick math. Cavern Hydra's going to kill 2 different things. So no, he doesn't. He doesn't have anywhere close.
He draws a Royal Falconer here for the turn. And again, it could possibly be a way to stall. He does decide that he wants to play it.
Yeah, and see, here's another spot where if he had done that, the 3rd flyer would have been significant for Mythic. I mean, I think Mythic has a lot of room for error in this game, but I do think last turn should have been played differently if I were doing it. But
the great thing here, if he does get additional turns, the Royal Falconer and the 2 Falcons themselves have got inspirations from the 2 Mirror Knights and the Mentalist. Unfortunately, though, we've got another shard, and Mythic is going to go ahead and take out one of the birds.
And he has 2 flyers against 2 health, so I think that should be it.
Yep, and Havoc's got no resources. He did draw Mastery of Time, but unfortunately, as you've already said, he just doesn't have enough life here.
Nothing left to do here.
So we did see decent. It looked like in this game here, and also in the first game, the Havoc really liked that card draw from the deck there. And his version of the Gore Feast does seem like it draws a pretty good number of cards.
Yeah. I think he was relying on it a lot too much. He seemed to be playing he was the control deck in both of those games, and he was very much probably the aggro deck and needed to find ways to win the game instead of extend the game. And he did that on a number of occasions, and I think it really cost him probably both games, especially that second game. I really think he might have even been able to sneak that second game out.
Were you surprised by any of the cards here? What card do you think stood out the most from over at Mythic's side? Was it the Vampire King or was it something else?
Well, I don't think it's fair to say that Vampire King ever sticks out. It's an exceptional card, and if you're playing Blood, then I'm never surprised to see it in there. So I think really the biggest surprise from Mythic's deck is actually what it didn't have, and it really seemed like it was lacking in removal. I mean, I saw that he brought some in there from the reserves, but I mean, there wasn't a lot of removal in his deck. There was, some evasion creatures. Really wasn't much for Crush. So I think that's part of just the way of dealing with Mythic's deck, is because outside of his troops, he just doesn't have a lot of answers.
Fair enough. And from the Gore Feast side, any surprises there?
Well, I think I noted that when he was playing, but those crushing blows just seemed very out of place. When you're playing, Gore Feast, it seems like you really want to be able to maximize what troops you have on the table. The fact that he has Mirror Knights and Mentalists, both with the Inspire ability, seems to second that concept of wanting to have, troops that you can play. So I was really surprised to see cards like he had the Bottle Vitae and Crushing Blow that, to me, could have been used a little more wisely in his deck slots.
Well, I got to say, I'm pretty excited by both of these decks here. The Gore Feast deck, to me, as a brewer, I like that it draws a lot of cards, but especially Mythic's deck, the Blood Wild there. We haven't really seen a whole lot of decks like this, and it looked like, he did have the one game where he had a little bit of trouble with the resources, but other than that game, he accelerated out. He put out big threats pretty fast, and they were pretty effective from all the games that we saw there. I was pretty excited to see that. It worked out pretty well. Yeah. Well, I think that's going to do it for this game here. And thanks for watching, everybody. This is JJ and Cowboy Papa, and we'll be doing another game here in just a few minutes.